So where we stopped off with Wednesday was sum and difference of complex numbers. So we talked about complex numbers and the complex number, or the imaginary number I, which is defined to be the square root of -1. So we don't ever, or we're pretty much from here on not going to write the square root of -1 or leave it as the square root of -1. We're going to rewrite it as I. We also went through powers of I, talking about if we have I to a power, we take whatever that power is, that exponent, and divide it by 4. And we're going to get one of 4 things. We're either going to get a decimal of 0.25, which tells us it simplifies to I. We get a decimal of 0.50, which will simplify to -1. 0.75 is -I. And 0.00, which will reduce to 1. Now, out of all these here, getting a decimal 0.00 is not actually going to show up, especially on a calculator, because if it divides evenly, it's just going to show us the number. Because if the exponent was 16, 16 divided by 4 is 4. The calculator is not going to show us 4.00. It's just going to show us 4. So we went over powers of I. Now, sum and difference of complex numbers. If we add or subtract 2 complex numbers in the form of a plus bi, we add the real parts together, and then we add the imaginary parts together. So we look at the first one here, 8 minus I plus 5 plus 4i. First thing we have to do is simplify the parentheses. So with our first expression here, 8 minus I, since there is no number or term in front of the parentheses, we can drop it. Really, we're multiplying by +1, giving us 8 minus I. We can do the same thing with 5 plus 4i, giving us +5 and +4i. Because it's really +1 in front, we multiply by +1. Just gives us 5 plus 4i. Questions on this so far? So looking at those numbers there, those terms there, what are our 2 real numbers? 8 and 5. Those are our real numbers because they don't have I. So I'm going to rewrite them, put them next to each other. We have +8 plus 5. Our 2 imaginary terms are -I and 4i, so we can move those 2 together. So we have -I plus 4i. Okay? Now we need to be able to add and subtract or combine like terms. Now the 8 plus 5, we've done that before. You've done that before. 8 plus 5 is what? 13. Yes? Now -I plus 4i. Well, you know what? I'm going to rewrite it for a second. I would not rewrite it if I were you. What if I said we had -x plus 4x? What is -x plus 4x? Almost. X minus 4x, or 4x minus x would be 3x. So, what's -I plus 4i? 3i. So for the most part, we can treat I almost the same way we treat variables, with combining like terms, multiplying, doing all that there. The only big difference between I and a variable is if we get a power greater than 1, we get I squared, I cubed. We have to reduce it back to one of our 4, I, -1, -I, or 1. We cannot leave I with a power greater than 1. So that's it. We're ready for the next one. So our next one here, the first set of parentheses, 7 minus 6i. Since there's no sign, negative sign, or number in front of it, it's just going to be 7 minus 6i. Now our second set of parentheses, we're going to have to distribute that negative through. So it's going to turn our +3 into -3. It's going to turn our -6i into +6i. So once we simplify the parentheses, we get 7 minus 6i minus 3 plus 6i. Now our real numbers are 7 and negative 3. So we'll subtract those. We have 7 minus 3. And then we have negative 6i plus 6i. Well, what is 7 minus 3? 4. What is negative 6i plus 6i? 0. So we could say plus 0i, but there's no reason to, because 0i is just 0, and adding 0 really doesn't give us anything. So really, 7 minus 6i minus 3 minus 6i is just 4. That's it. Questions on this here? Let's look at the next one. 13 minus 2 plus 7i plus 5i. Now again, the first thing we need to do is simplify our parentheses. So here we're going to have to distribute that negative through, which will turn our positive 2 to negative 2 and our positive 7i to negative 7i plus 5i. Combine like terms. So our 13 minus 2 is 11. Negative 7i plus 5i would be minus 2i. 11 minus 2i. That's it. Questions on this so far? We can look at one last one. 2 plus 9i plus 11 minus I. So we can do this one here next. And at this point here, we drop the parentheses, giving us 2 plus 9i. And we have plus 11 minus I. So we have positive 2 and positive 11. Well, 2 plus 11 is 13. We also have positive 9i minus I is positive 8i. So we have 13 plus 8i. Questions on any of this here? We feel comfortable with this here. All right. In that case, we'll jump over to multiplication, multiplying complex numbers. So we multiply complex numbers. We're going to treat it the same way we've multiplied any sets of parentheses up to this point. We're going to distribute through. We're going to multiply through by our number outside of the parentheses for this here. So we're going to distribute through 4i. So the first thing we're going to multiply is 4i and negative 6. So we'll do 4 times negative 6, which will be negative 24. And we still have our I term, because 4 times negative 6 is negative 24, and we still have our I. Plus, because we have 4i times I, well, it would be 4 times 1, which is just 4. But we do have I times I, which would be I squared. Almost. The only issue we have with saying this is our final answer is we cannot have I to a power, I to an exponent. So I squared is what? Because we could do our property, do 2 divided by 4 to simplify the power, which is 0.5. And what that tells us is that I squared is going to reduce to negative 1. Out of all the powers of I to know, I squared equaling negative 1 is one of the most useful ones, especially in this here. I squared is negative 1. So that tells us here that we have 4 times negative 1, which tells us that we have negative 4. So negative 24i minus 4, or really if we wanted an a plus bi form, standard form, we would say negative 4 minus 24i. A plus bi is more preferred, standard way to write it, but those are essentially the same thing. Questions on this here? So when we multiply, we will have to make sure that our powers of I, we do not have an exponent greater than 1 attached to I. Because if we do, we'll have to simplify that. We ready for our next one? So here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to multiply through by 15i. 15i times negative 1 is going to be negative 15i. Now 15i times 2i, 15 times 2 is going to be positive 30. And I times I is I squared. Now we just said I squared is what? Negative 1. So really what we're saying is that we have negative 15i plus 30 times negative 1. Well, 30 times negative 1 is negative 30. So we have negative 30 minus 15i. So after we did that multiplication, I just went on and flipped them. If you don't have them flipped, we could rewrite it the other way as negative 15i minus 30. But again, we do want that real term first. So negative 30 minus 15i. Questions on this here? Be ready for the next one. So now we're going to have to do some distributing. We're going to have to multiply through and get a few more terms. So we're going to start with 9, our first number on the left. We'll multiply through here. So we'll do 9 times negative 4. 9 times negative 4 is negative 36. Now we can do 9 times 7i. Well, 9 times 7 is going to be positive 63. And we do still have our I term. Now we're going to do the same thing with negative 2i. We're going to distribute it through. So negative 2i times negative 4. Well, negative 2 times negative 4 is going to be 8. And we do still have our I term. And then lastly, we have negative 2i times 7i. Negative 2 times 7 is going to be negative 14. And I times I is going to be I squared. So we had to distribute through. We had to multiply through. Now, before we can say we're done, we're going to have to combine like terms. 63i plus 8i is going to be 71i minus 14 times negative 1, because I squared is indeed negative 1. Now, our 14 times negative 1 is just going to give us positive 14. But because the negative 14 doesn't have the I squared anymore, it's now positive 14. It and 36 are like terms, telling us that we have negative 22 plus 71i. So we had to multiply through, reduce our I term, I squared terms. I is the power is greater than 1. Combine like terms. But because we had negative 14i squared, negative 14i squared became positive 14. Negative 36 plus 14 is negative 22, telling us that 9 minus 2i times negative 4 plus 7i is negative 22 plus 71i. Questions on this here? We ready for the last one? 4 minus 12i times 11 plus 8i we can start off with our multiplication of 4. 4 times 11 is going to be 44. 4 times 8i. 4 times 8 would be plus 32i. Then we can do the exact same thing with negative 12i. Well, negative 12i times 11i is going to be negative 132i. And negative 12i times 8i, negative 12 times 8 is going to be negative 96. And I times I would give us I squared. Negative 132i plus 32i is going to be negative 100i. Now we need to convert I squared. We need to simplify it because we can't leave it as I squared. I squared is negative 1, giving us negative 96 times negative 1, which is going to become positive 96. So I'm going to multiply them and move them over next to the like term of 44. 44 plus 96 is going to be 140 minus 100i. Questions on this here? Does the calculator agree with what we got? Yeah. So we could do those there. Because there was 2 addition ones we didn't get to, right? 13 plus 4i minus 8 plus 4i, which would have given us 5. And 16 minus 13 plus 6i plus 8i. So the calculator can do most of these here. But that is it for 3.41. Now the homework is 6 through 16 even. So 6 through 16 even, you want to evaluate each of those expressions. We want to simplify them as far as possible. And we want to leave our answer in simplest radical form. So you might have to use a combination of the 30xs and the graphing calculator to simplify some of those. Because if it simplifies nicely, then the graphing calculator will do it. If not, we've got to work it by hand a little bit and have the 30xs work it too. Some of them could be just I, so like the square root of negative 5, the negative would come out as I, but because the square root of 5 doesn't simplify, it's just going to be I square root of 5. So some of them might just be we bring the negative out as I, and we're done. 20 through 26 even. Evaluate the power of I. So we take whatever that exponent is, divide it by 4, and we're either going to get I, negative 1, negative I, or 1. 31 through 34. Add and subtract those expressions. 37, 38, 9, the same thing. And then 43 through 46, you're multiplying those together. And that's it.